Welcome to Reels on the Rocks, the show where your hosts Whiskey and Sweet Tea discuss film from the unpretentious perspective. In honor of spooky season, we're discussing some of our favorite gruesome twosomes. First up, Dale and Tucker versus Evil. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, please be advised that spoilers are ahead.
Hey T, how does it feel?
Really good?
How does it feel to already be a better podcast than the Hawk Tua podcast?
Oh my god.
Shots fired. Already like a month-old dated reference, but I just had to throw it in there.
The T-Spill channels are still talking about what even is this?
She seems like a nice girl. I don't have it. Frankly, I'd do the same thing. If I said something stupid outside of a bar and got famous out of it, I'd be trying to secure that bag too.
Right. I don't blame her. It's odd to just watch it, play out when it's not working.
I'm more disappointed in us as a collective society for letting it get this popular. I was at Spirit Halloween a few weeks ago, and there's literally like Hawk Tua t-shirts they're selling. Like, what can I say?
Listen, I'm waiting for her to pop out and be like, this whole thing has been a social experiment about the poor taste and, whatever of the general public and their ability to make anybody famous. But go on, what were you about to say?
Well, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. It should be October when we're posting these, but, you can listen to them any time of the year. This October, we are focusing on Gruesome Twosomes. So a couple of buddies getting up to no good. And if you read the title of this, you already know which one we're going to talk about. But apparently T has a topic to discuss that requires my expertise. So what did you have in mind, T?
Oh, okay. So we've actually talked about his films before, I believe, on here. Maybe, or that may have been like the one weird month where we had some issues. But when we were first trying to figure out the far away recording, but I recently read and post all over the internet, so I had to go and find an article source for this. But apparently, Kevin Smith has regained control of his film Dogma. I don't know if you'd heard about that. So he said, and I'm reading now from an article published in Yahoo Entertainment, written by Joe Vito. So it's broken like the last few days or so, but apparently Harvey Weinstein had held the film hostage for years, and then I guess his company finally sold it off to some other company, and that company they either, I don't know who reached out to who first, but basically they said, hey, would you want to do something with this, like maybe tour with it, or releasing it again, like they kind of wanted to know like what they could expect from Kevin. So Kevin Smith is just, to quote him exactly, I said 100%, are you kidding me? Touring a movie that I know people like and it's sentimental and nostalgic, we'll clean up. So apparently this movie is I don't know if it's, I didn't do a lot of background into it, but I guess, it's a cult classic, at least. It's a favorite. It's really hard to find because I guess the Weinstein company put it out years ago, and then never, what's the word? I'm like reissued.
Reissued
DVDs of it. So like you could find DVDs and stuff of it online for like several $100s and stuff when people would resell them.
Good for Kevin Smith, because that's going to make him a nice chunk of change. This is one of his... I feel like this is kind of a mixed review, sort of. Like, Kevin Smith fans, I feel like most of them love this movie or hate it. I enjoyed it. I was not aware... It's funny you bring this up, because I was just seeing a thing recently, because he's been trying to get Mallrats 2 made for, like, the longest time, and I think he's saying that he's possibly going to make that this year. In the same thing I was watching, he has a history of saying he's going to do something like in a year and then it just doesn't happen. So hard to, gotta take him with a grain of salt. But that's neat. So yeah, like it's a weird movie if you haven't seen it. And yeah, we did talk about Clerks in an episode that never came out.
We're so sorry. Maybe we will circle back and do that month. We might do a repeat of that month. At
we
some
might,
point, because that was a good pairing.
It was indeed. I don't know if we talked about Dogma in that episode. He's got a.
Well, first off, what is Dogma? Tell us what is Dogma.
Well, so one thing, you have only seen the one Kevin Smith movie because
yes.
I was kind of introducing you to him when we recorded that review. And the thing about Kevin Smith is he's a big nerd and he's a big comic book guy. And so he sort of started the cinematic universe. Him and Quentin Tarantino were really the only filmmakers at the time where all of their movies took place in like their own universe, so the characters could be in different movies and stuff like that. So
right.
This was him kind of almost doing like a fantasy sort of thing. This involves angels coming to Earth, and there's, the Antichrist, and there's the apocalypse. It's like a very high concept Kevin Smith movie, which I know sounds like an oxymoron. And I think that's also why it's sort of contentious, because it's not really like most of his movies were just kind of stoner comedies, people hanging out at their job as like clerks at a gas station, convenience store, or
right.
Mallrats is about stoners going to the mall, and Chasing Amy is about like comic book nerds, and it's technically a rom-com. It's about a guy falling in love with a lesbian, and that's the whole thing. But his movies were never meant to be very like serious. So I think that for the people that don't like Dogma, I think that's kind of the linchpin of why it doesn't work for them. I have not sat down and watched it in the longest time, and the fact that the rights were all held up by Weinstein makes that make a lot of sense. Most of the times I watched it, for some reason, Comedy Central played it often. And that was the first time I saw it, because it's a very weird movie. Like, I was watching, I was like, what is this? I saw it was called Dogma, and then Jay and Silent Bob show up later on, and I was like, wait, this is a Kevin Smith? What is this? But I enjoyed it. I think also this was him kind of trying to be a little bit more smart or philosophical than he normally is, and I don't think it's as smart or philosophical as he thinks it is. And he probably doesn't think that about it now. This was, still, I believe, the late 90s, potentially the early 2000s. But it is a cool movie, and you've got actors like, Severus Snape from Harry Potter's in it as an angel, I believe. And you've got, because Kevin Smith was also friends with people like Matt Damon and Ben Affleck and stuff, and they've appeared in his movies. But right. I'm just happy for him, because that's really stupid. Well, this isn't even just a Weinstein thing. I don't understand why studios will like hold on to something and not use it, and also not release it. The least you could do is just release it on Blu-ray or something. You get the cash flow, or even on streaming, like if it was on Amazon or something to purchase digitally, even if you're just buying a license. And that's like a thing with my favorite genre horror movies. For instance, Dawn of the Dead, I haven't checked. I think it still is really hard to get a hold of, because that specific movie Romero did with a producer who has the rights to that movie. That whole series is a mess too, because then the Night of the Living Dead, he co-produced it with someone who then got the rights to that. It's a mess, but I'm happy it's not tied up with the Weinstein Company anymore.
Well, they were just so petty. According to this article, he said that it said at least in this last January, he was at a live event, and he talked about how he made a $1 million offer to the company to obtain the rights and was turned down. Which I think is like, the Weinstein Company is like, falling apart basically.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure just like, everything that they own is probably going to get sold off to. Tarantino is going to be happy. I'm pretty sure he's going to have a full rights to all of his movies that he released with them.
Well, what's interesting is about this is the two people that you bring up that had their own universes are the are two directors that were also kind of in a way founded and brought to the attention by Harvey Weinstein. I mean,
Oh yes, oh
yeah,
yes.
like it or not, he did make their careers.
A lot
Um,
of it, that's kind of what
it
was
does
so
seem though
horrific
that
about that story and about the company itself is it was sort of the only thing funding like independent filmmakers in the 90s and 2000s,
wait, so it was
you
the
know.
'90s. It was the '90s version of A24.
Pretty much, except it did everything, you know. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
just like doing artsy movies, because Kevin Smith movies, like I said, were basically stoner comedies. But yeah, through like Miramax and the Weinstein Company, you know, you had filmmakers like another one is Robert Rodriguez did a lot of films with them, and so you know you wouldn't have. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think that the Weinsteins had a hand in the Spy Kids movies. I might be wrong about that. I know like his early movies and stuff like that were often produced by them. But I mean, it. You know, people talked about Tarantino a lot when the Me Too stuff was coming out, primarily because he's kind of the, you know, the I guess the most serious filmmaker that did stuff with the Weinstein Company. But there was a lot. I mean, oh my
Well,
goodness, what's her name? But Selma Hayek directed a film with them, and that was it's crazy. Like they pretty much had their fingers in a whole lot of pies during that
yeah.
period in film history.
You know, fun fact: the since you brought up Spy Kids, the whatever the headquarters for the spy thing is the Central Library in my hometown. So,
Well, that's because Robert Rodriguez is from Texas. Yeah, he might even be from San Antonio, but
right?
he's got a lot of love for Texas. It's the setting of a lot of his movies. He lives there. As far as I know, I'm pretty sure he still lives in
See,
Texas, and
why
he's
do see? But I think you're right though. I think you're right. The Weinstein Company had something to do
with
with
Spy Kids. I'm pretty
Spy
sure.
Kids, and
Like,
I'm looking it up. The first one doesn't say it was the production company, but now I'm just like, were any of them?
well, and even though you know it was produced by New Line Cinema, the Lord of the Rings films were partially put out through the Weinstein Company, and they did have like rights for like The Hobbit. As I said, it's crazy how many movies that company was involved with, and not just you know Tarantino movies, but just a whole section. Like I think you know, even though A24 is more artsy fartsy, that's a pretty apt description. And they were bigger than A24 as well, because they had so many different projects going. But that is crazy. So does he have plans? Like, did he talk at length at all about what his plans? Like, is he going to do a reissue of the film?
So it
Uh,
does sound like from this article that I'm reading, is it does sound that at least you know the company that purchased it, which this article never names who, but whoever purchased it, he even referred to it as the company that bought it. We met with them a couple months ago. So it sounds like they at least would they. It sounds like they want to do a like re-release, like you know, like a since like theaters maybe like a you know it's a special event, and he wants to tour with it. And they want to tour with it, which he says he's now open to do. He's like he wants to. Yes, he absolutely does because he said he refused to do anything with it before because of its affiliation to Harvey, which is why he tried to buy it off of Harvey, and they wouldn't sell it to him. But he says that as far as future things with it, he said scrolling. Oh yeah, he says he's interested in musing. According to this article, it says the Clerks director is also musing ways to expand the Dogma universe with new media, including potentially, you know, they don't know what they're going to do yet, but he's open to anything right now, sequels, TV versions, in terms of extending the story. So he really wants to do more with this property. It's not just you know touring because this is the 20 that he's talking. He talked about this back in January because this year is the 25th anniversary of Dogma. So when that's why, and I think that's why when it was sold, this company's like, we need to do something with this because we could you know make some cash you know, on this film, touring it or whatever. They approached him. They want him to do stuff, and he's very eager to make something and expand the Dogma universe, which is something that he was never able to do. So, what we can look forward to is, you know, definitely some Kevin Smith work related to this, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, he seems like he's poised to be putting out a lot of stuff. I know, like, Clerks 3 came out a little while ago and kind of mixed reception. I don't think anyone outright hated it that I know of. It was just kind of a weird.
To me, it was just kind of, it was
nowhere.
a little. It was like a little sad.
Yeah, no, I know the ending, and the ending is like shockingly kind of depressing. But I remember it being kind of surprised when it came out because I was like, oh wow, it's out, or it's coming out next month, or what, and then it came and went, got a limited release. But I actually, I feel like maybe part of the reason why he's saying that Mallrats 2 could be happening is he might be hoping to get some money off of, maybe touring with Dogma, which, do it, Kevin Smith. I will actually go see Dogma at the theater, because I don't think ever really truly sat down and watched the whole thing. I think maybe a friend of mine had the DVD in high school and I borrowed it. I know I have...
You should have kept it and sold it.
I've seen the film, like, from beginning to end in, like, out of order and in chunks, and I think I have at least sat down and watched the whole thing once. It's one of those... It's a weird one, as I said. Usually when people are talking about Kevin Smith movies, they're talking about Clerks or Chasing Amy, or, some people really like a Zack and Miri Make a Porno. In fact, he had a bit of a horror stint where he was making horror movies, so some people will talk about like Tusk or Red State or things like that. So he's kind of had a metamorphosis. He's done some stuff with his daughter, who he's got a really nice like father-daughter relationship with her.
Oh man, he named his daughter like Harley Quinn, right?
I believe so. Love so.
That.
Again, he's a big comic book nerd. And she was in his movie Yoga Hosers. And then he did that. And I never got to go, but he did movies. There's a fast food chain in his movie universe that he did like a pop-up for, and it offered,
wasn't it called like
vegan
Moody's
fried chicken and stuff. Yeah,
Moody's, I think that's what it was called.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's interesting. He hasn't really made... I mean, I guess, was Clerks 3 last year? It feels like it's been a while since
Clerks
it came
3,
out.
No, it was 2022.
Okay, so 2 years ago. That's
but
why
I just remember
I
just remember when they put out, like, before you even knew what happens in the movie, I was like, this is going to be sad, because they did just some publicity stills from just the movie, and I was like, Dante looks like he's been through a lot.
Oh man, some of those actors have aged really not great.
Right, that's what I meant, and it was kind of sad. It didn't just look like, Dante the character had aged and was older. It was like Dante had aged and like been through a lot. I was just
what's funny?
That's what made it sad.
Jason Mewes, who's Jay, he sadly, like, he's dealt with some substance abuse issues, but he looks really dang good for someone who's like had to go to rehab and stuff. Like, it's kind of funny. He's aged better than some of the other actors that Kevin Smith has worked with. And that's another thing he did recently that didn't get a theatrical release, but he did another Jay and Silent Bob movie. I don't know. He's just been doing kind of some straight to streaming things. I'm pretty sure Clerks got like a limited release, or Clerks 3 got like a limited release. So he's been working. I'm curious to see if he's able to, make a comeback out of this. But if he tours with Dogma, I'd definitely check it out. It's one of those
he'd probably...
It's making a lot of sense why I haven't seen it, because I was not aware of that issue it was having.
Right? It's like you should have kept your friend's DVD and then like sold it online later. You could have made like at least $500.
Maybe.
But you're not a bad person, so it's okay.
It'll happen. Well, and I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have stolen my friend's DVD to begin with. I'm not. I've had that. Well, I don't mean
stole it, just accidentally to return. We've all done that. Like, not like accidentally on purpose, but like literally borrowed something and then forgot you had it.
This it bears repeating. Anyone who's listened to our show, I'm always saying, if you like something, buy the physical media. You know, not just to keep it alive, but because things like this can happen. Unrelated to movies, but I did sort of briefly have something like that happen to me on happenstance. So I don't know if you know this, but back when Scott Pilgrim versus the World came out, there was a video game that was really good that came out at the same time as the movie. It was done as like an 8-bit beat 'em up sort of game where you can play Scott or Ramona or the band members, and you're just, you can play with up to 3 friends. So it was co-op, and you go around and you're fighting the minions and the 7 evil X's and stuff, and it's a nice short game. The same studio that did it recently did a Ninja Turtles game, which I bought. But so I had heard, the Scott Pilgrim game is like really good, and not just as like a movie game. It's like its own thing. The art style is based off of the manga. So I bought it. Here's the thing. I forget if the studio didn't ask for permission or if the rights were like, taken away from them. Something happened legally where the game could not be sold anymore. So they removed it from digital stores. So I had that downloaded to a PS3, and it's recently it's been cleared up and it's available again, but there was like a decade where I could have sold that PS3 for like thousands of dollars.
Oh my god.
Because it had this game you had no access to. And sadly, I waited on it because now, as I said, the game is available again. Whatever legal issues got cleared up, so you could go.
You
on
could have paid off your
PlayStation
student loans.
Store or whatever.
You could have paid off your student loans.
I could have, and I was thinking about it a lot. But part of it was also like I liked the game, so it's all very ironic because I've like not touched my PS3 since like 2012 or something like that. I've got a PS4 now. So it's just funny. Like, I don't think I would have missed it all that much if I had sold it. But the moral of the story, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody else listening, is just buy physical media. You never know if something's going to be taken away. We've talked about how buying it digitally is not the same thing. You're buying a license. If at any point the storefront or company or whatever just decides they don't want you to have it, it'll mysteriously disappear. Yeah. Like, unless you have it hard downloaded onto a hard drive or something, like, it will be gone. Your Amazon movies that you have in your digital, whatever they call it, a wallet collection, whatever.
Yeah.
They'll be gone. So buy the Blu-rays, buy the DVDs, buy physical copies of whatever you like, because one, you might be able to get rich off of them if you don't like them that much and you'd rather sell them for the money, or you might not ever have an option in the future to see it again. So take care of that stuff, buy it, because stuff like this happens all the time.
You've talked about how I just watch a bunch of old TV all the time, which I do.
Yeah.
But like I can't find most of it anymore. So it's like I've started, like when I go to just resale places, I started picking up stuff. Like I just completed a set of Hogan's Heroes because I can't find that anywhere right now. So I'm just like, I have all this sort of stuff that I'm just like, I'm holding on to stuff because it's like, do I watch regularly? No, but I want to be able. It's like those people who buy trucks and they claim that they want you to use to haul, but they never haul. They're like, yeah, but I want the option. It's like I would like to have the option to watch something when I want to, and people are like, that's what streaming for. Streaming is not what that's for. Streaming is for pushing new stuff. And like eventually I'm worried a bunch of really great classic works and things that are, good, not the boring classics, the good classics are just going to fall off because people aren't going to like watch them. And without there being physical releases and physical screenings now and stuff to push your stuff and into, reintegrate new audiences and stuff, will we lose our classics? Because if we still think of we still think about things, a lot of the great Hollywood films and stuff of the olden days, they're not even 100 years old yet. This is how fast this industry is changing, and we're still very, very young into it. And so the things that will we lose these works is that's something for a different, that's a topic for a different time, but things to think about.
No, and I may tease you, but people like you are the reason that we are able to hang on to these things, because for all we know, the people who should be keeping these safe might be neglecting them. They might lose them.
Well, I mean, lost media is a thing. Like there were seasons of Doctor Who that were broadcast
Oh,
by
tons,
the
yeah,
BBC that they lost, and
not just lost, they taped over them.
They
because
taped
they, like,
over
ran
them?
out
Yeah.
of film. Yeah, there was a fire, they taped over some. There's like 3 decades of Doctor Who that no one can see because it's just gone.
My favorite thing is they always find stuff in weird places. Like they found, I think some church or something bought one of BBC's old buildings, and they finally found in the basement like some of these missing episodes that were just left in a box down there. But I'm like, you cannot depend on the studios to keep things safe for you. Even what's that other one? Metropolis, right? Metropolis, the classic.
Yes.
For the longest time, what the Metropolis everybody had seen was only about, I think, like 60 or 70% complete. And they finally found somewhere down in South America, somebody had a reel of it that was like 98% complete or something. So they were finally able to do this. And so it's like, we need to be doing more to preserve. And preserving is not just what the studios are there for. We can't count on them now that, you know, what's its face, the tech sphere is entered into studios. We need to be doing more to protect our properties in our hands.
And that's where I always I know he did it for one of my favorite movies of all time. But that's where, you know, I will be nice to Martin Scorsese, because he does put up his own money to save a lot of you know, he'll restore movies, he'll search for movies and stuff like that. He does a lot of work with that. And, you know, anyone listening to this, check on your favorite TV show or movie, because you'd be amazed at how far-reaching this is. Recently, I've been kind of condensing my movie collection. I've been selling off old DVDs and replacing them with Blu-rays, picking up some new movies and stuff. And one of my favorite TV shows of all time is Futurama. And I was thinking, ooh, I've got some like beaten up DVD collections from like the first 4 seasons. I wonder if they have the completed series, or at least a completed series from, you know, because it used to be Fox, then Comedy Central had it. Now it's on Hulu as an original series. So it's been all over the place. So I was like, maybe there's like complete series or whatever. There is not on Blu-ray. You can like buy them individually and it'll cost you like hundreds of dollars, but the only like complete set of Futurama from like seasons 1 to 10, from like the beginning to when Comedy Central aired its last episodes, that's it. It's like on DVD. So, and I get why. It's because it's bounced around to different owners and stuff. So, and I guess it would make sense that it's on Hulu. Well, it's weird, right? So it was a Fox show, and Fox is basically like Hulu, because like that's where they put all of their stuff, because Disney owns a controlling stake. So I don't even know.
And Fox is owned by Disney now.
Well, and that's the thing, because Comedy Central was owned by Paramount, so they had the rights to it. So I don't know even who owns Futurama. I know it's a Hulu series now, and the recent season I watched ages ago was okay. But that's a perfect example. Like, look up your favorite show, your favorite movie, see if you can get it, because you might be surprised to find you can't find it anywhere, or the only option is a digital copy where you got to go on eBay and buy it for like $300 from someone.
Right. Or you might end up in the case where, you know, because these studios, these streaming platforms are now behaving like those people you knew in high school who would delete posts if they didn't get enough likes. Like, that's how they're behaving now. They're like removing series that didn't get enough views, and it's like, well, how it can never grow now because no one knows about it and they can't watch it. So, you know,
very true.
You need to pick which one. Anyway, that being said, the point here
good
is
for Kevin Smith. Make your bag.
Kevin Smith. Thank you, Kevin Smith, and also protect your shows and movies at all costs.
And if he does do a touring of Dogma, I'd recommend you go see it. Out of his movies, I actually think you would like it a lot. It's got a lot of religious stuff.
I'm sure they'll probably bring it down to Austin. Everybody usually, when they do like a movie tour, they come down to Austin.
Yeah, no, out of all of his movies, I feel like it would be your favorite, because it's dealing with a lot of things that you are interested in. So, and it's probably the least like stupid stoner comedy out of his movies. So check it out.
And on that note, speaking of stoner comedy,
Woo!
So first off, Do you want to talk about drinks, or do you want to? No, let's talk about what are we talking about today, Whiskey? What are we talking about
Well,
today?
what are we drinking? I am drinking because it is very appropriate for this. I've just got a can of Pabst Blue Ribbon. I feel like at some point maybe I've had it on the show before. I don't think so. And at least if I have, it's very appropriate for this movie because it seems to be their beer of choice. But what about you, T?
So this is actually like the perfect movie for us to talk about because I am actually drinking tea. Now, I was going to do a tea cocktail instead, but listeners, this is coming out a little bit late because I was actually sick all last week. So I'm actually just drinking Earl Grey tea with lots of honey. But it actually worked out really well. I was going to do a chamomile cocktail. I found a recipe for something that used chamomile tea. But I mean, like, you're over here, whiskey's over here with the alcohol, sweet tea's over here with the tea for real. So this all worked
It's
out.
just a chill beer kind of. To be honest, I haven't been feeling great the last week either. So, one beer is not going to put me in the hospital unless it's been poisoned.
Yes,
No,
but is it on ice?
it's nice and cold.
Okay, good.
So just one. Probably going to bed shortly after this. But
Because I have 10 to 12 of them already cold. If you want, no, I'm just kidding.
so Tucker and Dale versus Evil. So way back, and I mentioned this in our Evil Dead review, but in our first season, I don't remember what episode it was, but I mentioned horror comedies, and T was like, "Ooh, horror comedies are always bad," or something like that. And I know you had not seen really any horror
I
comedies.
was
Or
a
if you
different
you were probably
person
thinking of
then.
like the scary movies or something like
Yes,
that.
that's kind of what I was thinking of. That was like the only thing I could like. I hadn't seen it. I knew of them. I'd seen scenes from them. That was my entire frame of reference.
But when you said that, I knew at some point on this show we were going to talk about two different movies, Evil Dead 2 and then this film. I also felt like between the two of those that you were going to like this one more. I was surprised a few years ago when Evil Dead 2 you liked it so much it's become part of your Halloween rotation.
Yes.
But so I am almost certain that any of you listening have heard of this movie, even if you're not a horror person. It's kind of one of those everybody's seen it at this point movies. And it's got an interesting sort of history and also the way that everybody has seen it because this was not a wide release. So Tucker and Dale versus Evil was conceived of in like the mid 2000s. I think it might have even been shot in 2007. It was pretty much shelved for 3 years. And there's all sorts of wacky stuff when I was doing research for this. So the release date is December 9th, 2010. But in parentheses on IMDb, it says that it was released on that date in Kazakhstan. So I guess that's where it first came out. Also,
who was there? Raise your hand if you're in Kazakhstan.
Right? Well, and that's the thing, too. I'm pretty sure this was one of the earliest examples of direct-to-streaming, and we'll get to that. I've got a comment question for any of the people listening to this on YouTube Music, because I heard about this and saw I saw it on Netflix forever. It was just one of those movies that at least to me was like associated with Netflix. But it's again, it was pretty much released online and a lot of people saw it that way. But shenanigan number 2, researching on IMDb, they didn't have a budget, so I just Googled it, and at least Wikipedia says that the budget was like around $5 million for this, which means that it's technically a bomb because it only grossed worldwide $5 million. Who knows if that number is accurate. It does not feel like it was a very expensive movie necessarily to make.
Right, there was a movie we talked about a while ago. I forgot what it was, but you were like, wow, this had a huge budget. I have no idea what they spent it on. Because it doesn't look high budget. You said this, and it was one of the movies you picked.
No, I
It was
know.
like the funniest
It sounds
thing.
like something I would say. I'm trying to think what movie it must have been.
But like you said, they're guessing, and you said if this was like one of the earliest examples of like a direct to streaming, that really there's not really a way to to quantify, at least on our end,
Maybe we
views
didn't
into
talk
dollars.
about it on the show. I know I feel that way about the Rings of Power show because
No,
I haven't seen the new season, but I remember season 1 being like, why is this more expensive to make than Game of Thrones?
Right? No, it wasn't. Yeah, no, it wasn't that. But I just remember that. You'd be like, I don't know what they spent this money on.
Yeah, and now I'm trying.
For
to
some
think
reason,
what
I'm thinking it was a lower budget horror film. So we'll have to go back and figure out which one we set it on.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. All the lower budget horror movies I can think of did very well. Like Evil Dead 2 had a solid block. In fact, it was.
Well, no, I'm not saying it went bad. It did badly. I'm just saying whatever it was, it didn't look high budget. So we were just like, what did they spend this budget on?
Man,
it made a ton of money, but we were just like, what did they spend this budget on? But like you said, with this being Tucker and Dale being an early example of the direct to streaming thing, like you said, it's technically a bomb because it only made $5 million from its physical release.
It online. Again, I don't think anyone went to see this, even if it's like someone's like favorite movie. Like unless you went to like your local art house theater who was showing it at midnight or something, I don't think this really got any kind of a wide release. It was just there it is.
Yeah, because I feel like I would remember trailers for this.
Yeah. So anyway, like getting into, there's a bit of a theme with the production and everyone involved. So this was directed by Eli Craig, who has not done anything anyone's heard of. I thought, oh my God, because when I was looking at his other directing credits, I saw Zombieland and I was like, wait a second, he's the Zombieland guy? I don't think he is. Click on it, it's a TV movie. And then his most recent credit is a film from 2017 called Little Evil, and it looks like it might be a horror comedy about like the Omen, essentially, like the Antichrist. Written by the director Eli Krang and a guy named Morgan Jurgensen, who has basically written nothing else. To the point where I'm almost wondering if it's like a pseudonym or something.
It was a one-hit wonder.
Yeah, right. And then, okay, so the cast, we got Dale, who was portrayed by Tyler Labine, who has done a lot of TV work. He was in Escape Room, another horror film a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Not really well received, but that's another horror film he did. And he's done all sorts of TV roles. One that I just wrote down because it's one of my favorites is It's Always Sunny. Mm-hmm. Tucker, Alan Tudyk. If you you don't know who Alan Tudyk is, you know who Alan Tudyk is. He does voice work for everything. He's been in like every Disney movie as some character.
Right.
On the Harley Quinn show, he's voiced the Joker, Clayface. Like if anyone remembers Firefly, which is an excellent show, he was in that. He was the droid in Rogue One. Like, he's been in everything. If you are even somewhat familiar...
He even has a show on right now that's actually pretty good called Resident Alien, where he plays an alien.
That's right. I remember, and I'm glad it's still on, actually. I haven't seen that show, but I like the premise is funny.
And then
like
he also
has an alien.
He had an online... I think it was an online series that he did, or maybe it was a direct to a thing that it has a couple seasons, which my mom really likes. It was called Con Man. That's pretty good. So yeah, he's one of the, I would say he's one of the greats.
I think so. I think he's one of the best because I forgot how much voice acting he did. He's done that. He's done like mocap for some of his CG characters. He's in everything. Like if you don't know who Alan Tudyk is, like look him up and you'll see. Oh, that guy. Oh, like yeah, I know him. He's probably the most famous person in this movie. Because everyone else, like, so Allison was played by Katrina Bowden, who, say it with me now, has done a lot of TV. So she was in some stuff like Supergirl. She was a New Girl. She was usually playing like a character in a specific episode, but she's still doing TV. And then Shad, the sort of secret, not so secret villain of the film, was portrayed by Jesse Moss, who, say it with me now, has done a lot of TV. In one role that I wrote down, or one of his jobs that he did, he's actually been on an episode of The Good Doctor, which T really enjoys. He played a character named Kevin Wilkes.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look. See,
it was a one-off episode.
He looked very familiar to me during the show. He was also in Dear Mr. Gacy. I remember that.
Okay.
So I'm
No, and he had a recognizable face. I was kind of surprised I didn't see a lot that I would have recognized him in, because when I saw him, especially on his IMDb photo, I was like, I've seen that face somewhere, and not just in this movie. Like,
right,
he's got one of those faces.
So, but yeah, so there's that in there. The other one that looked familiar to me was, I called her Paint Girl. She was the one who decided to wear her heels into the woods. She looked familiar to me too.
I didn't do the entire cast. I just did the 4 main ones, because the others were, especially with the pattern I was seeing, I'm like, okay, all of these people are probably going to just be, character actors from TV. So I wouldn't doubt it. Also, the sheriff looked familiar, so I'm sure I've seen him in something before. But I just stuck with the 4 main people, because that's kind of where this is going. The director and writer worked in television. All of the actors worked this being a low budget film, essentially, this was probably a lot of their first features.
Yeah.
A lot of the people I just listed, Alan Tudyk doesn't count, but everyone else, it was like a lot. Once you go back before Tucker and Dale, they weren't doing as much. They did have some credits before, but it was their career took off with all the television and stuff. After this movie, they were doing a lot more regular stuff, but all of them did have careers beforehand. So as far as production stuff, that's pretty much all I need to get to. It was filmed in Alberta, Canada.
Makes sense.
You could probably guess it looks like Canada. Lots of those nice pine trees, fir trees, whatever.
It could have been the Appalachian Mountains.
It could have been. I think that's where it was supposed to be set. Yeah, I think it said West Virginia at the beginning of this. But so I had a feeling that T would really like this movie, and it sounds like T's mom also really likes this movie and thought you were really going to like this movie. So,
well, no, she didn't. She didn't think I was going to like this movie. She was like, okay. She's like, it's going to be kind of gross for you. So she was like, I recommend watching it in half-hour chunks, which I did not do. I want to make that very clear. But go on. Sorry.
Well, so tell us, what did you think of this?
I was pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed this movie. It was actually really funny, and I didn't get too grossed out. I think the most grossed out was the dragging of the half-consumed body across, I think it's either Alan or Dale, one of those. They're trying to. Yeah. That was probably the grossest it got. But if I were to describe somebody, I'd be like, okay, so I would be like, okay, imagine if someone took Three's Company and made it a slasher film. That's basically how I would describe the plot of this movie. Because, as you know, Three's Company, every episode, there's always some sort of misunderstanding. That's literally the entire plot of the show. So that's basically what this is.
Well, the term sitcom is used, and people just... At this point, the meaning is lost, and most people they know it's a comedy, but they think of the TV show with the laugh track, and it's short for situation comedy, and essentially that is what this is. I will say, so leading up until watching this movie, I know you were getting nagged by me and your mom, but you seemed like you were unsure if you were going to like this. What kind of reservations did you have? What were you expecting?
I was expecting it to be a lot grosser than it ended up being. And it really wasn't that gross. It, like you said, a lot of the gore in it was very... there was nothing, super disturbing, people's eyes getting pulled out or something, weird stuff that you always see in horror films, and people are like, oh my god, that was so cool, do you want to watch that? I'm like, no, absolutely not. And it's just there wasn't enough time. This sounds really bad, because I have this whole thing where I feel empathetic with characters, and I'm like, I don't want to watch these people die. You don't get enough time to really get an attachment to any of these characters except for Tucker, Dale, and eventually Allison. That you basically I was just like, oh, okay.
No, so that's what I've kind of tried to describe with slasher films. This is why you see a lot of horror fans kind of dehumanizing the fodder characters. You know, everyone cares about the final girl, maybe the final girl's boyfriend. You know, like the reason slashers work is because the ancillary characters are written to be unlikable or to barely be characters. Like it sounds like you're kind of experiencing that's how slasher fans feel about 90% of the cast. Like they care about the ones you want to live, but in general, it's like, you know, and that was kind of playing into how slasher characters are written in this film.
See, but I think they did a better job in this movie just because I really didn't care about anyone. The only one I kind of felt bad for was, I forget what his name is. I called him Orange Shirt. He's the one. He's the one who tried. Dale tells him to take the safety off, and he shoots himself in the head. Because I feel like he was like having his moment where he felt brave for once, and then that was the one I really felt bad for. But everybody else, flush him. Like I was kind of curious to see if Paint Girl was gonna survive or not, because, like, I mean, I had no attachment to her, but it was just kind of funny seeing her just wander around in her heels with her purse all the time. I'm like, I don't know why she wasn't carrying like a dog in her purse. She really should have.
Right.
But she was kind of, I don't know. She was, I was just like, you're interesting. Let's see what happens to you. But then I'm like, so my thing is like, how did she not survive? But weird serial killer possessed guy did it, you know, because I was just like, how did he, anyway, but you know, that's for a different time. But it's like you said, it's like how, and I guess maybe because all these people did all this stuff to themselves, and they were also acting out of panic, is kind of, I guess, why I was kind of okay with it. You know, it's different.
Yes.
It's different when it's, I don't know. I get too involved in the lives of people. Even people that I'm not supposed to care about. And the way that this film is structured and everything, I didn't really get a chance to care about the lives of people. I mean, they were awful people. Really, Chad was really the one that was the most awful. Everybody else was kind of just they were just kind of vapid. I was like, there's something seriously wrong with Chad from the very beginning.
Oh yes, and that leads to some excellent last minute payoff twist going on. So,
I will say, I always talk to you about how I find it disturbing that people online are always like, oh, what are your favorite kills? And I'm like, that is so disturbing. But I was kind of disappointed with Chad's ending. Everybody got some just extremely gory, not extremely gory, but, you know, like more disturbing deaths. And then Chad's thing is like, he falls out of a thing and breaks his neck. That was it.
Well, we'll get into that, because I have like a mild criticism mixed with a non-criticism. Like there's something I feel like they could have done better, but I think you're forgetting something about Chad, which we'll loop back around to.
Okay.
But speaking on the violence, this is something I talk about again with slashers, is like the context of the violence is often what makes the film have a specific tone or kind of push you to feel a certain way about the violence, whether it's actually scary or whether, and this, so way back, I think it's been 2 Halloweens ago since we talked about Evil Dead 2, but I introduced you to the horror subgenre of splatstick.
Yeah.
And this is another one that I would say falls into that category. There's not like, you know, a geyser of blood coming out of the wall at any point, but all of the kills in this are actually deaths rather than kills.
Yeah.
And they're funny because of how absurd, and like, as a, you know, like you pointed out, it is essentially a situation comedy, and every death is the result of a misunderstanding. And the way in which they come up with the situation that leads to the death never stops being incredibly funny. Partly because, you know, and there's even a great scene that kind of points this out when they're trying to explain themselves to the sheriff when he comes to their cabin, and they're, oh, we've had a doozy of a day. If you tried to explain the setup of any of these deaths to somebody, you'd look like a crazy person. Like, the one that I'd say is like the most iconic in the whole movie, and always like leads me to cackling like an insane person is the chainsaw and the beehive.
Oh yeah.
It's like something out of a cartoon, and it's one, and it also, this is a love letter to horror fans. There's a lot of references, and clearly like the way that he's flailing his arms around with the chainsaw and how he's just kind of mindlessly running around, it's because he's getting chased by bees. But this is clearly a Texas Chainsaw reference on top of that.
Yeah.
Like, in the context of the movie, there's a reason for why he's doing it. It's funny that the guy thinks that he's being chased through the woods
a crazy
by a chainsaw
wielding monster.
And it's like, and that too, there's also the play on how in a lot of horror there's, the inbred redneck who's always
I thought that
psycho
was
killer.
a call. I thought the whole setup was a callback to Deliverance.
So not just Deliverance, but there's quite a few, because you haven't seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but that basically is like the inbred redneck psycho family movie. Like that's the one that kind of started that whole trope.
The house from that
I'm
movie,
pretty sure that predates Deliverance as well, because Deliverance was the early 80s, right?
No, Deliverance I thought was the 70s. Hang on.
I thought it was the late 70s, early 80s.
Listeners, we have a dispute. So we're going to go ahead and pull out our handy dandy cell phones. And
I could be wrong. I just know that Texas Chainsaw is shockingly...
It was a 1972 thriller based on a 1970 novel.
Okay, Deliverance was?
Yeah, and then the original Texas Chainsaw was 1974.
Okay.
I'm like, it had to have been sometime in the mid to late 70s.
It's also one of those
my mom
things
worked
where
at the theater then.
Yeah, it's also one of those things where I don't really think Deliverance is considered a horror film. It's like a thriller for sure, but I don't know if... But anyway, so yeah, that's like a trope. There's another film that kind of makes fun of horror tropes that Joss Whedon did called Cabin in the Woods. And that's a whole thing where it's like, oh, the psycho redneck torture family or whatever. Like, it's such an ongoing thing. But that's what I think is so great about this is... As I said, I think that's part of the reason you can handle the violence is because they're doing it to themselves. And I think that's why I had a feeling you were going to like this. And I'm pretty sure your mom also knew that's why you probably weren't going to be as turned off by this one.
So I actually had an observation about the violence and its purpose in the film.
Yes.
You were like, okay, I'm going to continue. Okay, so maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I always thought the way that the violence of the film, for the most part, except for Chad, where everybody, where it's like they're all doing it technically to themselves, was a commentary on how every character in every horror movies ever, or especially the slasher films, bad decisions always lead to their demise. Like, not like them actually doing it to themselves, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Like, oh, let's go hide, as from the Geico commercial, let's go hide in the, behind all the knives and swords instead of getting in the car and leaving. So I thought that was always the purpose of the deaths the way they are. It's just a commentary on how objectively, if you think about it, and especially in slasher films, how stupid the characters are. Like, not this obvious, but that was my take on it.
Well, and let's not... I mentioned how the characters who are getting not killed off, but that are dying off, I mentioned how they're written to be very one-dimensional. They're also written to be very stupid. So, like, we start off the movie, we are with them initially, and we're seeing kind of their perception of things. And I'm pretty sure, like, that whole opening scene with them driving, already they're kind of obnoxious. There's the one, hey man, gonna smoke some weed. Oh yeah, and the guy he got a car because his dad bought it for him. And then Chad's like talking, like they're all kind of crappy. Like they're written to be like almost eye-rollingly, stereotypical.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's an apt observation because it is sort of an extension of the bad decisions they're making.
Well, especially when you said it's supposed to be kind of a love letter to horror fans,
Exactly.
But go on.
Yes. So I think that goes into. I'll just get into. So the next bit of notes that I took. So, as I said, this film is a film everybody has seen, or at least you've heard of it. Especially if you're a horror fan, this is just like a staple at this point. And one, I mentioned, there's like a couple of reasons I think everybody has seen this movie. One, availability online as early as like 2010 when it came out. Like this, as I said, this was just on Netflix for like 5 years. Like it was just constantly on Netflix. The other reason I think everybody has seen this is, as far as like horror films go, this is pretty critically acclaimed. It has won 12 awards total. Most of its wins were for Best Feature or Best New Feature. But I wrote down a couple of the most prominent ones. So the biggest one for sure is it actually took home a prize from South by Southwest.
Oh, yeah.
It won an audience award for midnight audiences. Fangoria Chainsaw Awards gave it Best Limited Release / Best Direct to Video Film and Best Screenplay. The Fright Meter Awards gave it the Best Supporting Actor for Jesse Moss as Chad and Best Screenplay. And the Calgary Underground Film Festival gave it Best Narrative Feature. So there's a bit of a pattern in its nominations and in its wins for Best Screenplay, and I think it's worth getting into. I was going to say that.
Yeah, I thought it was well written.
I think so too. I have a couple of gripes about certain little things, but it really goes without saying just how smartly written it is. Just layers of good, winks and nods to horror fans about things, but also just, I think what elevates this and what makes it so popular, we've got a bunch of very capable performers. All of the actors are good, but they're, TV actors, they're character actors. So you're not going to have a lot of star power, and you're also probably not going to have, extremely, like, I don't want to say anybody's bad at acting or anything like that, but it's just not going to, every movie, especially if it's like really good, it's like, why is it really good? In this case,
and I was gonna say, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to say, because you'll probably say it, but I think we had the same thought, is they're playing sort of these over the top vapid characters, but it never comes across as forced or like they're putting on a costume.
Yes,
of this,
unless it's intentional, because some of like the reason that character you like was wearing heels is because it's funny. Yeah, and because she is such a like.
She's the Sharpay of
ditzy yeah, exactly. She's like the ditzy popular girl who didn't think to bring hiking boots to the forest. So what I was saying is, when you don't have a lot of money, when you don't have A-list actors, when you don't have a lot to go on, the best case scenario is to have a really good script, because if it's written well enough, you don't need a lot to make it work. And that too. The other reason I think the kills, or deaths, I should say, were not as hard to watch for you is because they didn't have money to make anything super gratuitous. And also they didn't want to make it disgusting. But it's one of those, the movie ended up really excellent because of its limitations, because it couldn't rely on a famous actor. And also it couldn't rely on a lot of special effects or anything like that.
I'm going to go out here on a limb and say shame on the Academy for not putting this up for Best Screenplay, because this is a very well done screenplay. It has something that I love, and I love not when films are circular, but if you know what I mean, where the film is a closed loop, where there's nothing left out, there's nothing left untied or undealt with.
Yes. Well, and so again, I'll get back to the ending at the end. But the other reason I think this is elevated, and it also speaks to a lot of horror fans, is, we talked about Evil Dead 2 as a horror comedy. This is not just a funny movie, but it's also a horror movie with a message, a very wholesome message. It's about perception, and it's about prejudging people. Because that's the other thing that is really good about this, and I feel like they could have pushed it a little further. But so we start off with, the teenagers going out, and they have an interaction with Tucker and Dale where they're like mean mugging them as they pass, and oh my god, did you see the way they looked at them? Those
But here's the
freaks,
thing.
blah, blah, blah.
Here's the thing. Were they actually mean mugging them, or were they perceiving them as a mean mug because they felt
Exactly
threatened?
And that is where the movie picks up too, because we cut to Tucker and Dale in their car and we see them talking and stuff. And there's also one of the other best scenes in the movie, I think, is when Dale tries to talk to Allison, and there's a term
Walks
for
over with a
that.
scythe. I was
Yes.
like, dude, come on.
So that scene, again, it's a good tongue-in-cheek reference to something in like horror movies, whether it's, and I think this kind of works for supernatural as well as slasher, but I believe it's referred to as the Harbinger, or like, don't go into the woods out there, you're gonna die, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And it's sort of that, and it's also sort of like setting him up from their perspective, like, oh, he's a psycho, he's laughing maniacally, he's gonna chop him up or whatever. But it's that scene is so great because we see Tucker and Dale talking, and we'll get into. So one of my first nitpicks is I feel like they could have pushed the perception a little further, because we see the teens first, and then we have a scene with Tucker and Dale in the car.
Right.
I feel like if they hadn't had that scene, it would have made the Dale trying to talk to Allison scene a little bit better. Like if that was the first time we were actually seeing Tucker and Dale talk, we would, because then we would have been fully in the same mindset as the teenagers, right?
Right.
So that's just my opinion. The film relies a lot on the dramatic irony of you knowing more than what these teenagers know. So, and that's also where a lot of the comedy comes from. For that initial bit, I feel like it would have been nice to prolong it a little bit longer, but that's just me.
Like, not only do we know more than teenagers know, we know more than Tucker and Dale do. And
yes,
that's what I think is kind of what really makes it a good misunderstanding film. Because you can easily see from both ends why it's, because sometimes it's very, very hard. I think sometimes it's very, very hard to pull off convincingly, but it's just like when you see what's happening and then you see how each side reacts differently, you're just like, oh my God, what's going on? Well, actually, speaking of perception, I think when they Tucker and Dale first get pulled over the first time, I think I think we're supposed to get the first hint of a mistress perception, because it kind of looks like something else is going on in the car.
Oh yeah.
And and then Dale's sitting there with his top off, and then he's like, yeah, we're my boy's vacation. Oh yeah, it's just there's just so many things that are setting up just perception just in general from every sort of angle.
It's just comic misunderstandings, but it continues to go. There's also a lot of, I mentioned in past reviews of things like having good setup and payoff is great, and there's a bit of that in this. The one of the deaths, I guess, I don't know if I'd say it's funny. You almost laugh because you can't believe you forgot about it. But so when the sheriff dies, early on when they're checking out their cabin, there's that
the
bit
post.
Where, exactly, leans on the post and almost gets, nails to the head. And it's just one of those almost like satisfying, oh no, kind of moments when you see him lean on the post and you know what's going to happen, and you know that it's what's going to lead to, and you know what that's going to make the teenagers think outside. And there's so much of that as well, with like callbacks to things and stuff like that. But I feel like the fact that the film has a message kind of elevates it too. And not only that, I've kind of talked about how horror fans get a bit of a bad rep sometimes. Like people think like, oh, you enjoy these movies, you must be serial killers. And you get that more when you're in like grade school. I think adults aren't quite as judgmental as that, depending on the adults. I don't know if you're like super fundamentalist Christian or something maybe. But
Considering the conversation we
like,
had before this started.
I feel like on so many levels, this is a love letter to horror fans. The setups are funny. The callbacks to famous horror films are great. But I also think the message probably resonates with a lot of horror fans because they feel like Tucker and Dale, you know, like they're perceived a certain way by their peers, especially if they are in like high school age, because then they're kind of in the same age bracket as those kids.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's not just the fact that it has a good message, but it also just resonates with horror fans about being prejudged based on how you might look or your interests or things like that.
And like you said, that probably does appeal to horror fans, but you know, it also extends the film popularity. That's a universal message that, you know, a lot of people can relate to.
For sure.
So it does. And I'm not saying it's just. I'm not trying to diss your thing. I'm just saying it. That's kind of what makes it be extend to an audience just outside. That's also outside the general horror community. Is because
absolutely.
Like you said, it kind of makes it like a universal message. It's like what is it? The blood of horror films. You know.
Yeah.
It's a universal.
This is. You know, I had a very strong feeling you were going to like this, but this is also, you know, I can't necessarily recommend horror films to everybody all the time. But this is one I genuinely think I can, and I always do. If someone has not seen this, I'm like, oh, you'll love it. Check it out. Just go in blind, especially, you know, with you kind of having a preconceived notion of what it's going to be about. Like
which
I
is so
say,
hilarious.
Don't look up anything, just watch it.
Which is hilarious because the film's all about having preconceived notions.
Exactly. And that too. Like but it's very violent and there's gore. I just genuinely unless you are super, super squeamish with blood or something, this is one of the few horror movies I can genuinely recommend to everybody.
And it's really not that bloody.
No. And again, it's all misunderstandings. You know, speaking of, so T was, I forget, T's always sending me stuff. There was a thing, I also don't know if this is true or if it's someone just saying things online, but you sent me that thing about like some parents taking like a 3-year-old to see Terrifier 3.
I know, yeah. People were in like the Reddit group on the Regal on something. I think it was either in the Regal group or something, and it was just like there was a 3-year-old in my theater. Like, what's wrong?
If that is true, that's messed up. I have trouble believing that, but I also don't because I've like I think when I saw the first Deadpool, there were like little kids in that one. This is again, it's always up to the parents. Kids have different things, but this like Deadpool, I don't think is as disturbing as taking your kid to see one of the Terrifier movies.
Yeah.
So genuinely, obviously, it's rated R. But this is one of the few cases of a horror movie I genuinely think I could recommend to just about everybody.
Oh, I can agree with that.
And let's get into Chad because I've been holding off on a couple of things. There's a bit of criticism with some little things with him, but so Jesse Moss, he won an award for his portrayal of Chad, and I feel like I get some heavy Gaston vibes from this guy. I don't know if you picked up on that.
I can. He definitely wants to be the hero.
Yes, well, and as again with Perception, it's kind of like, well, what is heroic? Is it killing the masked killer or the torture redneck family or whatever? Like it's he's traditionally, or he's handsome, he's popular, he's like the head of his stupid fraternity. He's trying to date Allison, and he kind of talks to her as if it's like expected that they should date because they're the best looking and all this, and they don't really have anything in common. And the dude is written like a complete sociopath to the point of it being comical, the way he talks and things, and how he's actually getting kind of excited by the idea of like killing these rednecks and stuff. And I feel like on top of this being about Perception, it's about who is the real monster of the movie. And it's pretty on the nose that it's Chad. But so I mentioned you missed something with that ending. So one of my criticisms is how the film actually begins, because I kept saying, "Oh, it starts off with the teenagers." It does not.
It does not. Yeah.
As you remember, I'm sure it starts off as like kind of a found footage thing with some news reporters going, "Ooh, this creepy abandoned barn. Some say it's haunted." Blah blah blah, and then a horribly burned guy who we don't know yet like jumps out and kills the news reporters. So one, I'll just get into my criticism. I think that scene shouldn't be there. It's a little. I know some people defend it for something else I'll get into with the ending of the film, but I feel like it kind of gives away that there's going to be like a psycho killer in the movie. And I feel like if it had just started...
To be fair, the title and the poster kind of give that vibe too.
And that's the other thing too. Like, I'll get back into that opening scene, but that's my other criticism. I'm not super into the title. I don't know what they could have called it better, but like Tucker and Dale versus Evil, I don't know. Like, maybe just call it Tucker and Dale. I wish part of the strength of this movie for me, as I said, whenever I recommend this to someone, I always tell them to go in blind, especially if they don't know what it's about. But this film shows its hand a lot, which doesn't ruin the movie, but I feel like as strong as the script is, that's its biggest flaw. Is it's like it could have really, surprised you more if it showed more restraint with trying to reveal information about the characters and things like that. I feel like the title could have been something a little more vague. I think the fact that they're because I know what you mean about the cover as well. They are clearly like the heroes of the movie. So when the creepy rednecks appear and mean mug the car, you're probably not going to assume that they're actually creepy rednecks. So that's one of my mild criticisms. I feel like it would have been better if, obviously, like, reveal it at the beginning of the movie. I feel like that point where Tucker and Dale are talking and Dale wants to talk to Allison, that would have been the best time to reveal it. And then you would feel kind of like a jerk because you prejudged these two guys yourself without, thinking, oh, they're probably just normal guys.
See, and I think that's why the scene's there, because I think you're right. Otherwise, there really isn't a reason for it to be there. And it could have also worked as like a mid-credit scene or something. Kind of like as a faux epilogue or something. But
so the other reason it is there, so you mentioned like you were disappointed in Chad's death. Here's the thing, T. So Chad didn't die because you'll notice, maybe you didn't notice, but so as they're leaving the logging shed or whatever it is, you see it's the two news people reporting on what had happened.
And then
that scene at the beginning of the movie takes place after Chad supposedly died. So he's not dead. He pulled a Michael Myers and got up when no one was looking.
But I guess that's what I meant. I mean, I figured that out. But it was just kind of just like, I mean, for that to work, I understand why he just fell out. But in the moment, I didn't put it together until I saw her reporting.
Yeah.
In the moment, I was kind of just like, well, that sucks.
So, and that's the other clever. So the other clever twist about this is like Chad is not only a villain, he has become a slasher. Like, this is like a typical slasher origin story. Either a homicidal maniac, kills off a bunch of teenagers and then disappears into the woods, or he was wronged or something. Like, there's always some tragic backstory, or there's always kind of an urban legend sort of thing with it. We talked about that way back when we talked about the Friday the 13th, the first one. So not only are our heroes kind of prejudged as being slasher killers, but the Gaston of this movie, the fake hero, not only is he not as handsome and popular and like he's not a good guy, he becomes what they expected Tucker and Dale to be. So there's kind of a final irony in that, in which he's off. He's going to be out in the woods, like murdering teenagers now himself with his burned face.
Well, and then but they also have an explanation. They also have an explanation for, you're right. That is like basically he becomes what he judged him to be. But I like that there's also just an explanation as to why he became so weird and intense about everything. Like, he didn't realize he had a bloodlust.
And that's the other funny kind. Well, funny. It's sort of corny. It's like a final twist in the movie, but it's also so convenient that they happened upon a newspaper. But that's the other sort of ironic twist at the very end of the movie. So Chad hates rednecks because he was told his mother and father were abducted and tortured, and his father was murdered by rednecks and all this. And then his mother like died shortly after he was born or something.
Yeah.
And then we find, and for the whole movie, as I said, he's written like a sociopath. He's creepy. He loves hurting things. And you kind of are thinking like, wow, man, you're sort of acting the way you're thinking that they're acting. And for
right.
someone with your backstory, you'd think you'd be a little bit more
chill,
gentle or something. And so finding out that his father was the crazy redneck, it's like great irony. It also kind of shows like, oh, it's not that he was a redneck, it's that he was crazy. And he passed it along to you, and you might not have been raised as a redneck, but you are a homicidal maniac.
Right? The evil, because he kept talking about, I've never seen pure. He kept going on about evil. It wasn't just, this, and it's like, well, like you said, the whole irony is that the evil actually lives inside of him.
Exactly, and him unable to see how evil he is being because he doesn't see himself as being able to make any kind of flaws, and he's got the main character syndrome, as the kids say these days.
Well, and also there's that. It's like it was never. It's like it's during the fire sequence. You don't real. It's like you can always kind of almost make the excuse that it was always to save his friends, but when he kicks his friend off who's still alive to let go of him, it's like, okay, clearly this was never about saving your friend.
For sure. And and speaking of the fire, that's another death that kind of cracks me up, is your favorite character, the pink girl, just deciding to use her lighter like after we saw Chad douse the entire cabin with gasoline.
Right. And then she sits down like right next to the gas cans, and I'm just like,
oh yeah,
what is wrong with these people?
It was like something out of Looney Tunes. But yeah, it's a neat little movie. Just like any other episode of the show, we spoiled the heck out of it. But
that's why I always say,
and that too, it's like it's nice
ahead.
and simple. Like, all of my complaints are very small. Pretty much it's just I wish that they didn't show their hand as much. Well, and that's it. The other thing about the title, I didn't know what this movie was about when I saw it on Netflix, but I thought it was going to be a little bit cheesier because of the title. I thought it was going to be about like rednecks fighting zombies or something like that.
Right, see, that's what I thought. And then until we got to the end, and I saw we saw the reporter, and I made the connection at the beginning that I was like, oh, that's why it's called Versus Evil. They were literally fighting evil, and just nobody knew it at the time.
Exactly. So yeah, that's like my only real complaint with the writing, or just the way that the movie was shown off, is I wish that the title had been vaguer, and I wish that it didn't show its hand so early. Because again, like, just from that opening scene, you see, oh, okay, there's like a crazy person out in the woods, and it's not the rednecks, and you get that from the cover too. Like you said, they're clearly the heroes from the title. They're clearly the heroes. So this whole like perception thing, it's still, you understand what it's saying, but I feel like, you know what it reminds me of, and I don't think I've talked about this film on the show before, but one of my favorite David Fincher movies from, I think it's been a decade already, but Gone Girl.
Mm-hmm.
and it was ever. I'm sure lots of you listening know about Gone Girl, but if for some reason you don't know what it is, you never read the book, you don't know about the movie. It's about perception in the same way, and kind of the way you see victims of true crime, and how you form narratives in your head based on the way the media reports on it and stuff.
Yeah.
And what is great about Gone Girl is, for like the first act of the whole movie, you prejudge what's going on, and then when you find out what who the real killer in quotes is,
mm-hmm.
And you find out like what's really going on, you are mad at yourself. At least for me, I was kind of mad at myself, because it's like, oh my god, I was doing what all of these people are doing in the movie.
Right.
I assumed a specific character was guilty based on nothing but a lie. Like, we're hearing the narration of a liar for like the whole first part of the movie. I'm trying to be vague so that I don't spoil that movie in this random review in case you haven't seen it. But that, I feel like, if this film had tried to kind of do something like that, where you almost feel as guilty as these teens for prejudging Tucker and Dale, I just think it would have been a stronger opening act, I guess. Because as far as like the comedy and everything, I think it's great. I think it is a really solid script, and I'm really happy that it has been so critically acclaimed. And it might be like one of the most awarded horror films, at least in like the indie scene. I don't think I've ever seen anything else like win at so many different horror festivals and stuff. As I said, I think that the script is really solid, and that is why this movie did so well. I think all the acting is great on part. As I said, Alan Tudyk's in it, and hilariously, he's not even really the heart of the movie. I'd say Dale is.
Yeah, Dale is.
But like, everyone does a really good job with the material they're given. Special effects are good, partly because they know their limitations and what they could afford. And like, I could go on about the cinematography and the framing and stuff. There's so much you could dissect with why something is comical. There's things that stand out in my head. I mentioned the beehive scene, the way that that's shot and stuff, and the way the
bees looked real
from his side. And even like you mentioned the wood chipper scene, the way that is shot too. Like, I think of the medium wide shot of when Alan Tudyk ducks down and the guy just leaps at him and lands in the wood chipper. There's just something really funny about that, just flat angle of that.
I want to say something about that bee scene, because I just remembered I had this thought when I saw that. I think the kid that runs into the thing and impales himself is the first one of the teens to figure out what's going on. Now, he dies basically immediately after figuring it out, but I think because they take that moment to show the bee landing on his nose, and you can tell that he sees it.
Going, what?
What? It's kind of like, I interpret that as he was like, oh, like he figured out what happened, and then he dies. That's just my opinion, because I was trying I'm trying to figure out that there was a reason why they showed this lingering shot of the bug landing on his nose. And that's the only thing I can think of, and I like that.
I think you're completely right. That scene, I think, is also kind of funny, because that's something I've always thought of in slasher movies. When they're running through the woods, I'm like, they're often not looking where they're going. And that's something I've thought of, like, anytime I've been to the woods, like, if I was running at that speed, I'm like, I would hit a tree or something.
Hey, that's what killed Sonny Bono.
Even when you're looking where you're going, sometimes the forest is like dense enough that you don't see everything. Especially like running at night. Camping with the Boy Scouts and stuff, I've definitely been whacked in the face by branches that I couldn't see because it was too dark. So just the way that they run through the woods and stuff, I also thought that scene was kind of funny in that way.
Did you ever have a snake thrown at you?
Another scene that's great, partly, like, obviously we know how everyone's being perceived at that point, but when Tucker is covered in bee stings and he's out there, like, calling to the college kids, come out! Like, that scene kind of cracks me up, too, because the way he looks and the way he's saying it, it's like, it's so threatening.
I know. It's like, I wouldn't want to approach you.
Yeah, and the way that they like assume, oh, he's probably like an inbred redneck, and his face is just swollen with bee stings. He looks like he's diseased or
He looks
mutated or
diseased,
something.
yeah, or like misformed or something.
Or he's got like a really deadly case of like syphilis or something. Like he just, I don't know. But yeah, like I could go on about the production and stuff, but just at the end of the day, like what's the best part of the movie? The writing in this one,
I agree.
Way it stands out. And
The only thing that felt forced, the only thing in this that felt forced is when what's his face Chad says, "Is that chamomile tea?" That's the only thing that felt forced to me. Everything else was supernatural.
Again, good setup and payoff though. It's kind of random that he's like allergic to chamomile tea, but it's
it's so funny that he's allergic to it because chamomile tea is supposed to be calming. And it's like, this dude is just, if you think about it, this dude is so nuts and so, just like bloodlust and like freaky about everything that the thing that he's allergic to is having, on most people has a calming effect. Like people have chamomile tea to go to bed, which, I mean, the fact that that's what he's allergic to and that's what they came up with, chef's kiss.
I agree. So I'm doing one kind of new thing in this episode. I'm always like, telling people to comment if they're listening on YouTube Music or whatever. Apologies if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music or one of those. I just like to engage with that audience in case someone wants to leave a comment. But I thought of a specific question to ask. So, as I said, I'm pretty sure a lot of people who clicked on this or, listened to the show even, and everyone has seen this film. So my question to anyone who's able to leave a comment is, if you have seen this film, where did you see it? Because for me, it was Netflix, and for the longest time, it was up there. And as I said, I didn't click on it because it looked kind of cheesy. I assumed it was like rednecks fighting zombies or something. Like the title seemed a little too much. So, but what changed my mind was the word of mouth in the horror community, online and everything. People were saying, oh, wow, this is a hidden gem. Check this out. I know it sounds stupid. It's got a bad title, blah, blah, blah. Just go in blind, watch it. You're going to love it. And I did. And I was blown away with how funny it was and how good it was. But I am curious because, even with kind of the weird money stuff I was looking at on IMDb, clearly no one really saw this at the theater. So if you're listening to this episode, where did you see it? Because for me, it was Netflix, and I have a really strong feeling that it's probably going to be 90% Netflix, because this was just on there all the time, and Netflix is kind of it's created a resurgence in popularity with a bunch of shows. Two right off the top of my head are Breaking Bad. Despite it being an AMC series, Breaking Bad kind of owes a lot of its popularity to Netflix because most people watched it on Netflix instead of AMC. And then the other show is The Office, The American Office. It had its run. It ended in 2012 or something.
Right.
But years later, I'd say I noticed it in around 2019. Suddenly, young kids are really into The Office. It's, people are, ooh, I'm just a Pam looking for my gym. All this Office stuff, and it's like, oh my god, why is this so Netflix?
Those people irritated me because they clearly did not see how toxic Jim was.
By the end, but he cleaned up his act before the show ended.
He moved to another state and didn't tell her.
No, I'm talking about after that, because
Oh, okay.
they have their bumpy thing, but by the very, very end of the show, they've kind of resolved all that. But anyway, my point is Netflix was the streaming platform for such a long time that a lot of shows and movies owe their popularity to Netflix. So I'm
their
curious,
resurgence in popularity.
Exactly. So I'm sure this was on other things. I'm sure it was on Amazon. I'm sure it probably was being screened at midnight screenings in small town theaters and stuff. But I just think I want to know, if you're listening to this episode, if you've gotten this far into it, and if you're on a platform that allows you to leave a comment, where did you see this if you've seen it? Because I feel like it's probably going to be Netflix. But with that being said, what did you think of it, T?
I am going to give it 3.5 out of 4 pitchers of sweet tea.
Excellent. And
I'm
you
actually
know what?
already
Yeah,
checked.
I think it deserves a 3.5 shots of whiskey as well. It's really good. It doesn't have the polish of a big budget film,
But
but
it doesn't
it's
need
got a
it.
lot of heart. It's got
I
a
think it
positive
makes it
message.
better for that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and that too. I've always talked also about how horror movies are the best genre for low budgets. Ironically, same with romantic comedies. Like they're the two genres where you can spend like no money, and if you're talented or if you have a good script, you can make it work.
Love and fear. Love and fear. They are the two things that you can do with any amount of money.
Pretty much. But yeah, it's great. I think it has transcended being a cult classic at this point. I'd say it's just a classic. Maybe someone will argue with me about that. But in this day and age, in the day of our Lord 2024, everyone has seen this movie. So in my mind, that makes it a classic. But what do you think? Do you think it's overrated? Let us know. Again, if you want to leave a more negative comment on a platform that has comments. If you liked this and this is the first time you're hearing our show, feel free to check our backlog of episodes. We got a whole bunch. I gotta say,
I will say if you
season of the,
I will say if you do leave a negative comment about this movie, I hope you trip over your inappropriately worn heels and land on a giant, spear that you were carrying.
But yeah, and speaking of, hopefully we get these episodes out by the end of October, but if you're really jonesing for some Halloween content, I can highly recommend our Season of the Witch from last year, 2 witch movies.
Yes.
2 years ago, I forgot what the theme was, but I know it was like supernatural, I guess. Evil Dead 2 and Poltergeist. Show them some love. We did reviews on them. But yeah, until next time, I've been Whiskey.
I've been Sweet Tea.
Keeping it Kino.
And suck it, Scorsese.
All right, peace out, y'all. We'll catch you next time with a couple of other idiots. Maybe doing some stuff out in the desert if you can figure out which movie we might be talking about. But catch you next time, guys.
Bye, y'all. Reels on the Rocks is a production of La Prince Laboratories. It is edited and produced by Alejandro Castillo and features original artwork by Asa Esparza and original music by Pat Mars. Follow us on Twitter at Reels on the Rocks and tweet at us with any movies or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future.